What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the final 8 cubes of the year. Lambie's editor is out of town for the holidays, so we are going to be trying to do this entire episode in one take, which is good because what we're going to be doing is a retrospective on Marvel Snap across the entire year. We're going to talk about all the major metas that we've been in and what our impressions of them were at the time. Lambie, I think I'm going to throw it over to you. We're going to start talking with Zabu Surfer, but before that, you mentioned you want to talk about Leech Leader just a little bit. So set the tone for where Marvel Snap was in January of technically this year, but, if you're probably watching this a little bit later, maybe it'll be last year. January 2023, where were we? Leech Leader.
Right. So just want to talk a bit about what Leech Leader was. I think some of you who were around remember that this was the time where everybody was afraid of Leech on 5, blanking on your cards, Leader copying your cards. This was like the last time also that White Queen was sort of relevant, right?
Yes.
Because they ran White Queen in this deck to steal your leaders or your big cards and stuff like that. This was Dara's brainchild. I remember Dara made this deck like for a hot location with the Thor and Maximus, and it kind of just worked, right? Because it's just like raw
Lamentus
stats.
1 was the hot
Yes.
location. That was the hot location. That was when it just came out. Lamentus 1 came out, and he made Thor, Maximus, All Stats, Leech Leader. And it turned out, maybe the Thor wasn't the best idea. It was fine. But, just All Stats, Leech Leader, pretty damn good.
Yeah, it turned out to be just like the core power aspects of Marvel Snap, right? Like you play stats and then you copy your opponent's best play, but with 4 more power. By the way, leader was 6-4, I think. So
That
that was
is
a
correct.
scary time in Marvel Snap. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about this topic. Can't wait to talk a little bit more about what we have in store
I
for the rest
actually
of the
did want
topic.
to highlight that deck was probably the first deck that ever seriously played for priority in the game Marvel
Yes.
Snap. And it was less so
Aero,
much that
right?
yeah, Arrow was like in there with Death Wave though, but because that deck was meant to use Arrow alongside Wave and a very cheap Death. It wasn't necessarily playing for priority. It was just, oh, I'm going to win one lane with this Death, and then you're not going to play relevant cards off this Arrow. Where this deck was like very much explicitly, if I am ahead and play the card leader, I'm going to win the game. And that makes it, in a sense, the first priority deck that we've ever had. Now, I've come to a difficult part of this podcast, which is I have to press the button to put those victory things up there while we continue to actually talk about each of these topics. Because again, editors out of town, we're doing this in one take. So what I'm going to do is throw it over to Lambie to talk about Surfer and Zabu, which is actually the meta I discovered Lambie in. When now that I think about it, that's the first time I ever saw you streaming was a Surfer deck with Arrow in it. So start there, and I will press the victory button.
Right, so we actually got to know each other in this exact meta, which is I was playing Surfer on stream with an Aero, like KM said, and then he raided me and start off a friendship right there. So yes, Zabu Surfer meta. All I gotta say about this meta was this pre-nerf Zabu was, I think, 1 year too early in Marvel Snap. Like, if this was maybe in 2024, it will be a bit more forgivable. But Zabu on 3, yes, it was a 3-cost Zabu, by the way. Zabu on 3 into 2 4-cost cards on turn 4
Pretty good.
was crazy. You could do like Spider-Man. You could do there was a lot of Dark Hawk, by the way. Dark Hawk and 4-cost Rock Slide back then as well. Yeah, basically the amount of energy cheat made Sarah look horrible. That's how
Yes.
good Zabu was. And of course, Surfer, I mean, +3 to everything. Every 3-cost card was like looked at that point in time. Right? Everyone was looking at 3-cost cards and like, oh, Surfer deck, this is gonna go in my Surfer deck.
Well,
And of course, Surfer
they
deck was
still do
insanely
that.
powerful.
They
Yeah, they
still,
still do that.
they still
They
do
still do
that.
that even with the nerf Surfer
Yeah.
right now. But like, I mean, Surfer back then was like a powerhouse. Like you were either playing Surfer, or you were either playing Zabu, or you were not winning. That's basically it, right?
So I have 2 anecdotes about this time and one little bit of additional context. The first is that the major thing that a lot of people who maybe weren't playing at the time remember this for is the Spider-Man Absorbing Man plays. So you'd have your 3/2 Zabu.
My
Zabu Red,
gosh.
discount all your 4 costs by 2. Spider-Man at the time had his old text box. He was a 4/3 that had the effect of your opponents not being able to play cards there on the next turn. And so you had this like Galactus-esque effect where you just effectively removed 2 lanes from the game on turn 5. You played your Absorbing Man on the Spider-Man. You played your Spider-Man. And so you just play 2 Spider-Men and they wouldn't be able to play on 2 locations. It was like a 2-cube machine. but it actually, because it was such a 2-cube machine, was genuinely not that good. Like, obviously, 2-cube free wins very, very good and had to be dealt with, but a lot of what the deck's real potential was late game enormous power. There were builds using Dracula and big guys and Ghost Rider. There were builds using Darkhawk, but the number one power spike that any Zabu deck could get was actually still Rock Slide, because that favored you so much in the mirror. And now the second anecdote I wanted to share from this time is, as far as I'm aware, that Silver Surfer deck was the best deck they've ever had in the game. Now, I don't know if that encounters back to beta, because I have that from Glenn Jones rather than from someone who was there during, the heyday of negative Sarah. But it had a consistent actual 60% win rate. And that might not sound like a lot when you look at the win rates of decks on something like Untapped, but those are tracking the deck, right? This is an archetype with a 60% win rate. It's unprecedented. It is wildly imbalanced in the official data that that encompasses everything, not just the people who choose to send in their data. So the fun thing about this meta that people remember wrong, one, the Zabu stuff was not like entirely Spider-Man stuff, and two, Surfer was actually a better deck, it seems. And actually, I kind of wonder about that Surfer deck, because it was such a dangerous meta gatekeeper where it had all these like free tech cards that it could just afford to run. It reminds me a lot of the Elsa decks, where it was just this very, very flexible deck that could fit all this tech because it had one card that had just so much more power than everything else, that it was able to like be a gatekeeper on really degenerate strategies, right? Like, oh, it had a Cosmo in it. You could afford to run armor. Everything that was trying to do something unfair, Surfer had a card for that. And it going away actually did allow for greater metagame diversity. So, moving on to the next topic, Lambie, what happened after Surfer Zabu?
What happened was my favorite card in the game became popular, aka Thanos. Obviously Shuri as well, but Thanos back then, did you guys remember Quinjet, Lockjaw, and any amount of free stones, and then you get free dinos, free blue marvels, free magnetos, free whatevers. Thanos Lockjaw was the king. Like,
Yep.
I mean, Shuri was around at that point in time as well, but we could honestly say Thanos at that time was like actually a tier 0 deck, like legitimately tier 0, right? Soul Stone still drew cards, Mind Stone only drew stones. Space Stone was slightly different. It was a better Space Stone, I believe.
It was
And also,
reverse cloak instead of current
yes,
cloak, right? It moved
yeah,
stuff to a different location, which is
yeah,
that's so dumb. You just like
it's so
free
crazy.
win like any lane that has that says you can't play stuff there. It's so dumb.
It's so crazy. Yeah, and Shuri, She-Hulk, Taskmaster, Red Skull, those have been around since then as well. Those two decks were the premier decks of the format, right? With Thanos being slightly ahead. I think Thanos at that point in time was at first not as popular because, well, we were just coming off of the Zabu meta. But Harry did his thing with Thanos ongoing in New York, I think. And then I was playing a lot of Thanos on stream as well. The deck is just crazy strong. Like every tournament, that was when battle mode started to become a thing as well. And then every tournament was dominated by either Thanos or Shuri, mostly Thanos. Yeah, this meta was the beginning of everything for me. Like it's really how I started growing my channel as well, because like I was the Thanos guy. At the start, no one even knew who I was. I was just the Thanos guy, and then like it kind of blossomed into something else. But yeah, this meta was the beginning of I think like severe like SD's decisions to look at cards and like nerf some stuff
Yeah.
as well. Like Thanos was way too broken with the whole Quinjet interaction, and like zero cost cards in a game with six turns. I mean, even now it's too strong.
So I actually have quite a relationship with the Thanos deck developing, because a lot of my Discord is responsible for how
Oh
it
yes.
spread back in the early days. And I'm not saying that like it originated there, because it didn't. I believe someone named Elite X Hasa
Yes.
actually was playing it in
I got it from him
January.
actually.
Yeah, he was playing it in January. I ran into someone who, there was like a chat room for high elo players at the time who was playing it. I got the list from them, but like they were just bot farming, so I didn't take it super seriously. But like we were all bot farming back then. But I played against them. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And one thing people will forget about the original Thanos list. First of all, the person I wanted to shout out in terms of Thanos originator, the Human Spider, who was like
Yes.
the big reason it picked up in my Discord. And to this day, actually, there are 2 Thanos threads in my Discord that have developed their own entire community. Like there are people who do not talk in my Discord who only participate in those threads. It is like it's like an entirely different thing. And a lot of that is because of the development of this deck that happened there. One fun thing I wanted to bring up that people probably don't remember is that one of the things we used to do with the Time Stone, we were so innocent, was we would play it on turn 5, free off a Quinjet. Or not play, no, it wasn't played on turn 5. Yeah, it was played on turn 5. Free off a Quinjet, soak, play a free She-Hulk the next turn.
Oh wow.
Or alternatively, you would play it on turn 4. This is what it was. This is the even dumber one. You'd play it on turn 4, soak 6 on 5, play She-Hulk in the Infinite. That used to be a thing we would do.
I remember that. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's just a wild time. We were very like the deck got optimized very quickly, and then actually it sort of fell off until Johnson figured out how to make it perfect with the addition of the Wave, Odin, Doom stuff. That's when it really entered its final form. It's something that like none of us actually got to, but Killmonger, Wave, Death, Odin, Doom was his sort of brainchild, and that's when it sort of blossomed into this unbelievable meta tyrant that took a lot of work to actually take down and was very, very difficult to defeat by any kind of normal means.
Yeah, there was even like She-Hulk sometimes thrown in there as well to benefit off of wave and floating on turn 5, stuff like that. Yeah. The Killmonger version also kind of like beat the mirror, right? Because you blow up the
Yes.
stones in the early game.
Still
Oh, by the
does.
way, at that point in time, this was like there was no Professor X in this deck. I know you guys are
None.
now thinking like Professor X
Zero.
is like the bane of your existence right now. At that point in time, Professor X was fair. Like it
Yeah,
was
we
too
had
slow.
better
Like,
stuff to do.
we had way better things to do than Professor X on turn 4, which is crazy, right? Like there were way better things to
Right,
do. No one
it's
was even
because of Wave,
considering
right?
that.
Like,
Yes.
like that's why we had better stuff to do than Professor X, is because we could also just be a Death Wave deck for no discernible reason, right? You'd have the Thanos early game, and then you'd have a Death Wave deck, and it's like, oh, that's cool, nice. But also, I think more than that, Professor X has only ever been good when you can double up on his effect. By what
Yeah.
I mean by that is like Storm Professor X, right? And then, of course, you have in the W Thanos deck that came out much, much, much later, it was Professor X and Spider Man, and now it's Professor X and Alioth. You can't just play Professor X, with the exception of those ongoing Destroyer lists that were the best decks in the game, like the first season of the game coming out. But like since then, it's become abundantly clear Professor X is best used in bunches when there are multiple things. He gets stronger the more lanes are already locked down because you're limiting your opponent even more. They scale multiplicatively almost. And at that point in time, that deck wasn't doing anything like that. And so then it became clear, okay, well, Professor X Alioth, Professor X Blob, those are the things that Professor X goes in Thanos for now. Previously, we were just doing big stats. We didn't need to do any of that
Yep.
other stuff. We were just cheating. And
The funny thing was,
oh yeah, continue.
yeah, I remember like we will actually this is so obvious right now, but when I look back, we didn't actually the first version of Thanos didn't not all of it actually had Devil Dinosaur. Do you remember?
I
Like at
remember
first,
that. Yeah, it
yeah.
was
Like
weird.
people were like not like auto including Devil Dino back then, but it was like so obvious, right?
We
But we
figured
didn't
that out
actually see
very
it.
quickly, though, right? Because I
Yeah,
remember
we
you and
did.
I talking about it and just being like, why would we ever not play it? Like, once you put it in the
Yeah.
deck, it just never came out.
Made
Like,
sense. Too much
yeah,
sense. Yeah,
yeah.
made too much sense.
And then, of course, this is a favorite of mine. They nerfed Thanos, and they
Yep.
said when they nerfed Thanos, they were like, you know, Shuri is just as good, but we think that there are some matchups that are good into Shuri that nerfing Thanos might help. And
Dun, dun,
I don't know
dun.
exactly who to blame for that, but they were dead wrong. None of it helped. Jump into the Shuri meta,
Nothing.
Lambie.
And yeah, just because of that Quinjet nerf and a few other nerfs to Thanos, we have just Shuri meta. It's obviously not just Shuri, but like to be completely frank,
It totally
I'm
was
trying
just
my
Shuri.
best.
No, I ran best of the besties in this time, and the finals was KJB versus Moyen in a Shuri mirror. And the only
Right, I
difference
remember
between their
that.
decks was Vision versus Captain Marvel.
Oh yes, I remember this. I was trying my best to remember what else was relevant then, but my whole mind was just Shuri Red Skull Taskmaster. I can't think of anything
Yeah.
else because like all my ladder matches, all my wins And like, okay, I was also playing Thanos still, like
Hmm.
post nerf, but it's still a good deck. But like Shuri was just way ahead right then. Like it was like Shuri on 4. If you don't have Shuri on 4, the mirror match you lose, stuff like that. Shuri 4, Red Skull 5, maybe even Vision, maybe something else, maybe float for She-Hulk sometimes still. But Shuri at that point in time was just unbeatable. This was still when Shuri could be like Shuri on the left and then like big
Yes.
card on the right.
So
Oh
like
yeah,
that
this
that's
was
the
still then,
context
right?
we should give is at
Yes.
that point in time, Shuri did not have her location restriction, which
Yes.
meant that you could proactively Cosmo a lane and then dump the big guy there, which meant all counterplay just didn't work. So
Yes.
like the Shuri location restriction arose out of this deck because playing Cosmo and armor, and this is a repeated thing that you're going to see, is when you can play tech cards for free because you have one card that is so much better and so much more power than everything else. I've mentioned this before with Silver Surfer. I'm mentioning it again with Elsa, and I'm mentioning it now with Shuri. This is a constant through line of creating like insanely non-interactive games when the tech cards get to be included for free because some other card is doing the heavy lifting for the deck. And that is what was happening at the time. And that is actually why their Shuri nerf focused on making her unusable with Cosmo rather than actually making her worse in any way, which is a very clever solution, in my
Agree.
opinion. And it remains something I'm very impressed with because the deck with Cosmo, I do think it was beatable. You had to do is try to flip the Shuri lane. There were like Patriot decks that tried to do this. I definitely played a couple of them.
Oh
Gunny
yeah.
won a tournament with Patriot and with Leech Patriot, which I thought was a really fun addition to the metagame. But it wasn't until after the nerf that people were able to actually take it seriously. Unfortunately, because at that point in time there weren't enough reliable ways to flip that Red Skull lane because he was just too big. And yeah, Shuri, pretty damn good at the time. I gotta tell you, the current
Yeah.
versions of Shuri with Sauron, right? We didn't even play Sauron because he was bad.
He was bad.
Like, how
He was
messed up
bad.
is that? Like everything we're
Yeah.
doing now that's good, it just wouldn't even have made the cut at the time. Like we didn't want a
Yeah.
1/7 Ebony Maw. It didn't matter. It wasn't worth the potential loss of consistency because the deck just was so consistent. It was unbelievable. A real
Yeah.
powerhouse of a deck.
Yeah. Being able to play like you said, the whole Cosmo armor thing, and then your big dude can be in the same lane as the Cosmo, and then that's crazy, right? You have full counterplay to everything. And flipping the Red Skull lane wasn't even that easy because
Yeah,
it's like what, 20, 30 power?
it
That
was
was like
30.
what, 540?
It was 515. It
515 Red
was
Skull. Oh,
30.
well, about
Yeah.
515. Yeah, 515. Yeah, so plus like then Taskmaster is a 30 power card and everything like that. So yeah, it was too powerful to have like any real counterplay, I would say. So that was the meta for a bit. And I think it lasted for like a month or so. And then we moved into May/June. And May/June is what we know at this point as the bounce meta.
Do you
Well, the
think that's
bounce meta
exactly
was
fair? Because like it became the bounce meta, but like before that, it was actually like a very open meta, right? Like it
true.
was it was like this very it was an open metagame where people were playing like Patriot and stuff like that. They were playing various other decks. Like you won Creator Clash in that meta because you brought bounce, but it also wasn't the only deck that anyone could play. Like there like people another thing that people are going to forget is and that we sort of overlooked a little bit, high Evo meta. They nerfed that one very very fast,
So
but it
fast.
was the thing that prevented bounce from like breaking out at the beginning, right? Because we had high Evo and we had old Spider-Man, which was insanely broken in high evolutionary because it was basically the exact same as Professor X, except you got to soak on your Sunspot, your Hulk, your Misty Knight, your Cyclops. So it was like, imagine if Professor X had an additional like 8 power or something. Like that's pretty much how old Spider-Man was in those high Evo builds. And those builds were obviously very good in a bounce. They really kept it down. Then they nerfed high Evo
So
with
quickly.
unbelievable alacrity. Like that
So
Spider-Man
quick.
nerf
Yeah.
came
It wasn't
down.
even an actual full meta game, man.
It
Like,
was like 2 weeks before they changed Spider-Man. Like, they were like, that guy costs 5 now. Enjoy. And then they went in the lab and were like, we have to get rid of this guy. And they eventually got rid of him like a couple months later. And then once that whole concept had slowed down because people tried to put Professor X in there, but he's honestly a lot worse in that shell than the old Spider-Man was. So you end up with like a much worse deck. and that allows a deck that plays on all of the locations all of the time to thrive, with Hitmonkey coming out in June, I believe. I
Yes.
could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's the date. And then you won Creator Clash with Bounce, and then it was just Bounce Mirrors forever. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I wanted to before I go into this, I wanted to ask where was the Galactus in all of this? I'm pretty sure there was some Galactus going on
Galactus
around
was
here.
never the best deck, but if you recall, there was one tournament just before he got nerfed where we were
Browdy,
like,
right?
what if nobody actually takes the counterplay to this guy? And we told
Yeah.
Browday to play Galactus, right? We were just like
Yeah.
Browday was like looking for something to break the meta, and it was like, well, you could just take Galactus if you really want to
Yeah.
just be like,
We were
no one's
both there.
playing anything about this, right? Because that's a metagame where absolutely no one had any of the counterplay to it. Like no one was bothering with it anymore. And I want to say that was actually like the tail end of bounce meta, right?
True. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
tail end of bounce meta, and everyone is just playing bounce and stuff that beats bounce, and so that means they have absolutely no way to like play a card that can beat Galactus under any circumstances. If I recall correctly, that's the metagame it was exploiting, where it's just like everyone has gotten too focused on these mirrors. Another thing I wanted to shout out about Bounce, though, is I want to shout out Equinox,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was the person who really demonstrated by winning. I believe it was a Snap fan, but I don't know if it was a Snap fan or a one of the opens. But she put like Super Scroll and stuff in the Bounce deck,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
was when everyone realized,
Monger
oh my
also, I
god, we
think.
can be a tech deck too. And that was a
Yeah, also Monger.
big deal. That was a big deal
Mm-hmm.
for this archetype. And I think if you want to really trace it back to like where Bounce became a real deck, it is probably that tournament where, because it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
always Super Scroll, but it was very much a thing. Because like the Super Scroll was in there, if I recall at the time, because of the Iron Patriot lists that I popularized. So Super Scroll would go in there and get an Iron Man or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but that
And
one is
yeah,
I think after like the prime bounce meta a little bit for the next topic. But the
it's
bounce
the
meta that I
same
think
bounce meta though. Like
it's true.
it like
Yeah,
Bounce
no,
was
but
still
like
like doing it. Bounce was still him.
true.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think one thing we need to highlight about why Bounce was really good at the point in time. By the way, that was also the meta with like Sandman and Doom, but they couldn't keep
Yes.
up. So that was Wave Sandman Doom meta to keep up with Bounce. But we realized very quickly, I realized the hard way as well, because I used to think that like Bounce loses to Wave Sandman Doom stuff. But like
I remember
if
this.
you
We kept
yeah,
trying to tell you.
yes.
Yes, I
If
remember
we
this.
were to offload the monkey Mysterio, then it was 3 cost monkey.
Two
Eh,
cost
2 cost
monkey.
monkey. 2 cost
Yep.
monkey and Mysterio on turn 5 into the wave turn or something like that. Like that's too much stats for
Yep.
like the Sandman deck to deal with. And one more thing about Bounce, which I remember was why it was super good in the hands of good players as well, and how I like ended up winning Creator Clash, was that Bounce is like old school, according to KM, right? Like in beta, Sarah was like the ultimate point
Ah,
slam
yeah.
deck, right? Like yeah, so Bounce did similar things whereby you could put any amount of stats wherever the heck you wanted, and your opponent was like, oh my gosh, where are they
Yep.
putting the stats? You have no idea, they have no idea. But the thing is, it's all in your hand, it's all cheap. Kitty Pride was 1/2 +2, was it? 1
Yes.
1 +2?
So she was 1/2 +2.
That's mad. Yeah, that was mad. So like my Kitty Pride was a 110 with no effort, like
Yep.
most of the time. And then there was Monkey, and then there was like Mysterios, and then the Bishops, the Angelas, pre-nerf, by the way, kept
Wait, she
growing
might
and
have been a
growing and
one
growing and
zero
growing.
plus two, which is the
Oh
same
yeah,
thing.
oh
That's the
right,
same
it's the same
thing,
thing.
because like you'd bast her.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was why Bounce was good, because any amount of crazy stats anywhere you want, it's like so much player control, so much stats, and yeah, that was why Bounce was really great. And I think that's about it for Bounce meta, and then we shifted very nicely into what I think was one of everybody's favorite metas for a while. Like everybody really loved this meta, which was the Silk and Brood Apps meta. So this Silk meta, I take a lot of credit for this like Silk deck, because it was literally on the day of Spider-Man's change to a 3/5. We decided to stream and like try and make like a move Spider-Man-ish deck. We actually got like 11 out of 12 cards correct on the first try, like the original Silk Shell, which is basically you just play like good like hard carries like Angela, you played like Craven, and then you just played Kitty, and then you just start bouncing your Silk, buffing the Craven, buffing the Angela. You never clock because of Kitty, you play the Jeff, and then you play all these movement stuffs, and yeah, the deck was just like at its core super super powerful, and it had nothing to do with like ongoings. Nothing was shankable, And that was one of the reasons why the deck was super powerful at that point in time, because the other good deck, well, not really best deck, the other good deck at that point in time was like Dark Hawk with like Zabu,
Yes.
Shang-Chi, Iron Lad, Enchantress, maybe a Doom, blah blah blah. And like it really just invalidated like most of the tech cards in the Dark Hawk deck, right? Because at that point in time, no one was playing pre-nerf Shadow King. So
Yep.
it was just like Shang and Enchantress, dead cards. I put all my raw stats that are always below 9 power, and you just never win. Like, we were actively making our Angelas 8, our Cravens 8, never 9. And then it's just like so much stats, but not enough to be shanked, and then the Dark Hawk deck just crumbles. That's why this deck was like it took over the meta so quickly. And everyone, my number one question on stream was like, "Hi, Lemby, should I buy Silk?" I'm just like, yes. I'm just
Yeah,
like,
no,
yes.
absolutely. The fascinating thing I think about this meta is it's the first time that a whole metagame revolved around, like, not necessarily, this is what's so weird, right? Darkhawk has been a constant factor in all of these metas, but
Yeah,
it
it's always
has
there.
very rarely been the thing we remember the meta for. Because it has, like, it's been around, it's still around, but it's never the thing that defines the meta. And I think this is one of those cases where that is wrong. And Darkhawk actually did define this meta, because
Yes.
this meta is actually entirely about blanking Darkhawk cards. And you see that in
Yes.
the Silk deck, and then you see that in the Brood deck, which
Oh my god.
just like showed up and ate the Silk deck's lunch
Yeah.
because it did the same thing, but better. It was like the
Yes.
exact same concept of I'm going to put a bunch of stats out here and be invulnerable to all the common tech cards. And it just did it better. It did its stats were more, right? You had like Forge, which was +3 into Brood, so you had a 315. And
Yeah.
you played Absorbing Man, who was a 4/5, so you had a 415. And then you played like Iron Man or whatever garbage you had in there. I don't think Moyen had Iron Man. He had Legion, I believe. And
Yes. Love
actually, it might have
Legion.
been, it was Legion Blue Marvel. And it was just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you just run these people over because you do the thing and they have no way of interacting with you. And one thing people forget about the Silk Move deck is the Silk Move deck was still a Shang deck. It still used its own Shang. And so the
Yes.
Brood deck was just like, nah, I'm good. Totally good. I'm doing stats. I'm not playing tech. You play tech. You deal with that. You have dead cards. I don't have dead cards. Get out of here. And I think that is actually just like a very fun metagame development, because I remember doing Infinity Conquest in that one. That was after we got back from Hong Kong, right?
Yes.
What was there was like Shuri Kitty decks. There were these
Yeah.
decks. There were so many. Even Darkhawk was still playable. You just had to, like, get a little less reliant on the tech. There were like 5 or 6 really strong decks. And I think that is sort of where the whiplash of our next topic comes into, because we went from a metagame where it was like, okay, by the end of this metagame, I really thought Shuri Kitty, that's better. That's better than these decks. It's like really catching up. It's like actually going to get there. I think it's going to be the best deck in the game. It was phenomenal. And then Loki happened.
And then Loki happened. Okay, before we go exactly into Loki though, I just want to say that this Silk Brood meta, as much as we keep talking about Silk and Brood being like top 2, which they were,
They
there were
were.
so many playable decks, right? Like
Well, okay.
so many playable
Here's the thing.
decks.
I don't think they were ever top 2 at the same time.
Yeah, no, they were
I
not.
think
Yeah,
I think it was top 1, and then Brood came out and it was top
and then top
1.
1.
And
Yes.
it's like they were never, there was no overlap there. The second it showed up, it was like, oh god. It's like, who are you? I'm me, but I'm you, but stronger. Like,
Yeah.
it was really scary, because it was just like you're out here doing all these like fancy Silk moves, and then some guy is just like, yeah, dude, I drew the 2, the 3, and the
Forge Brood
4.
apps.
Yeah, I got your ass, dude.
Forge Brood apps.
But yeah, no, I think people, that was the Legion meta, right? This is something I talk
Yeah.
about a lot when I talk about why people remember Legion is better than he is, because he came out in the perfect meta for him, where there were all these 2, 3, and 4 power scalers, right? All these very powerful 2, 3, and 4 plays. You had every play in the Brood deck, whether you did 2, 3, 4, so you could afford to play a 5/7, right? That becomes less true later on, and Legion gets worse, but people still remember him because he came out in the perfect meta for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now we move into what we all know and what we all love. No, I love. You guys don't love. The Loki meta.
I get yelled at
The
so much for
Loki
this, man.
meta. 2.5 months of different genres of Loki, all culminating in the same thing, which is Loki is the best deck.
Mhm.
Like, oh my gosh. Like, okay, so let's talk a bit about what Loki was at the start first, right? This was like 3-5 Loki.
Yeah.
3-5 Loki when it first came out. I can safely tell you guys that I didn't think it was gonna be this good, but I thought it was gonna be good. Right? I thought it was gonna be
You know what
good,
I
but
rated
not
it?
this good. What?
I rated it a 3 out of 5.
Yo, I think I gave it 4, I think. But like I thought it was good. I thought it was good. So Loki Collector was crazy strong. And at that point in time, I think I don't even know if Elsa wasn't out yet. Elsa
No,
wasn't out yet. We were
Elsa was the
doing
next month.
Quinjet. Yeah, we were doing
So
Quinjet,
the first, I
Sentinel.
I remember this one vividly because
Okay,
it's the
okay.
last time I remember being like, no, I'm right and Lambie is wrong about this.
Okay,
You
okay.
were playing Dino and Loki still.
Oh
You were
yeah.
playing Moon Girl Dino, and I was playing what ended up being. I'm going to take my victory lap here. I was playing the better version of the deck without
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
cards that your opponent gets. And you were like, well, I'm crushing all these people in Conquest. And then, like, the next month you played Ladder, and you were like, I totally understand why I was crushing Conquest.
Yeah.
I remember this. But yeah, no, it ended up being it ended up being very similar to a deck I was actually playing before Loki came out. That was like my tier 2 like favorite, which is like a Kitty Angela Dino kind of deck. And then when Loki came out, I was like, all right, well, we can't play the Dino anymore. We got to like do everything else. But it was like a Kitty Collector deck. Those were your two scalers. Kitty Angela Collector. That's what it was built around. And so you'd scale off of that, and then you'd also have Loki. And then everything else was like, you had your Sentinel or whatever to just keep your hand full. And then in the middle of it, they changed Snowguard.
Oh
And that
yeah.
was like a big juice to Loki. And it ended up becoming something pretty similar to like the more common versions that we see. Curves got lower and lower and lower and lower so that your opponent would get more bad stuff and you would get more good stuff, hopefully. And people started to get used to how to play the mirror, playing for, oh, I need to get their Loki, so I need to have a full hand when I do this. If I don't get their Loki, I'm absolutely screwed, things like that. And collectors were routinely getting to 25 power. And then Elsa came out. So we're into Loki Part 2.
Yeah, I mean, like Loki Part 1 was also interesting because, like, the Loki. Firstly, we started to realize that playing decks with good cards is actually bad into
Yes.
Loki.
Yes.
Like Thanos was horrible.
Oh
Playing your
my
own dinosaur
god.
in Loki decks was
Yes.
horrible. And yeah, so people started running things to give your opponent crap, right? They played like Cables. Okay, it's not like Cables, not crap, but like Cable steals Lokis,
Yeah, the idea with
Mirages,
Cable was that
and
it
stuff like
steals
that.
Loki, but it's like I still don't know if that idea made sense.
I don't think so
I
as
don't
well, but
think it
like.
did, but like
Yeah, I don't think so as well. But people are playing crap in their deck and
yeah.
just trying to play Collector Loki. So
Yep.
it's kind of interesting. But yeah, now we move on to like I wouldn't actually say this is like the better Loki meta, but it's also like a powerhouse Loki meta, which is like
It's probably the
Loki
better
cards
deck.
benefit so much from Elsa, right? They benefit so much from Elsa.
Yeah.
Like that time Kitty, Jeff, like a pre-nerf Elsa, by the way, you could like buff any lane. So
Dude,
Elsa was crazy,
this
2
deck was
3.
so dumb.
It was so easy to play back, by the
This
way.
was the best deck I have ever played. People are going to
Yes.
ask that question a lot. Like, no, this was the best deck I've ever played. Elsa on release is the best card they've ever made. I don't even think it's that close. Like, I think she is
Okay.
significantly better than Zabu. I think the only thing that is
Okay.
close is Original Surfer. Like, that is actually it. Like, people talk about how, oh, energy cheat is broken, right? But what actually gets broken is the ratio of energy spent to power. So power
That's true.
buffing can also be broken. And in Elsa's case and Original Surfer's case, it was one of the strongest things anyone had ever done. It was absolutely and completely ridiculous. Elsa was routinely a 214, which means you got to play all of these free tech cards. Luke Cage, Mobius, who cares? You just need bodies on the board to trigger the Elsa. And meanwhile, Elsa's not even like a 214 the way a Werewolf was a 214, where it only goes in one lane. Elsa's a 214, and you can't do any tech cards against it because half of the power is invested in a kitty, and the other half is moving around the board. It's ridiculous.
This was the point Shadow King started to slowly get like
Yeah.
buffed and buffed and buffed, right? Like, like what, 2 changes, 3 changes to Shadow King that slowly made it the powerhouse that it is right now. Like I
Yeah.
think it's like the right time. Like I think Shadow King was horrible in its original form, what, 4-3. No one played that card. But like, yeah, so now I think at this point, Shadow King was like slowly creeping up in the meta. People also figuring out how to play Loki metas, Loki mirrors, and then they introduced the werewolf. I mean, we don't have to go too deep into
No,
like
I think we
Loki per
should.
se, cause
I
okay,
actually
we
think
should.
we should.
Fine,
I think
fine.
we should. This is like You are the Loki guy. People yell about. I released a Loki video today, and like all
Yeah.
the comments were like, "Cam, don't you get tired of talking about Loki?" It's like I like winning. I'm sorry.
Same. Of course, I love winning.
I like winning. It's not my fault this wins. That's
Yeah.
not blame second dinner, not me.
So the
But
werewolf came out, right? And then at 3-3, people were like on the fence about this card. They were like, oh, do we have enough on reviews in this deck? Can we move enough times? People actually thought this was a Silk Move revival card, but oh my god,
yeah,
they was so wrong. This was Loki on fire card because like the Loki deck at this point, even before the bounce engine was introduced, like that was like maybe a few days after Werewolf. No, actually maybe just a day after. But like the Loki deck generally already had so many cheap on reviews, right? Sentinels,
Mhm.
one cost random generation stuff. Mariah Hill started to see more popularity when Werewolf like came into play here. So I feel like Werewolf was the catalyst for Loki transitioning to the bounce engine.
correct.
And the bounce engine also
Well,
got Nico at this point, right? We also
well,
kind of got Nico, right?
yes, but like also, I mean, the Elsa decks were doing bounce stuff, right?
Yes.
Like it wasn't
It's
like
Falcon though.
yeah, like it wasn't necessarily like playing Falcon, right? Like, but like I remember when I first put Falcon into the Werewolf Loki deck, Tanja was like, "That card looks like it's terrible." It's like
But then
it did look like it was terrible, and it's like it just turns out it's worth it because when you have something that is super broken, it's the same logic as like Jeff in the old Elsa decks, where it's like, yeah, you wouldn't normally play that in a Loki deck, but you know, you gotta
Just
lean
cause
into the
Elsa.
Elsa here, right? Like, and also one more note on the Elsa thing. I actually received an incredible piece of advice from Tanjo in the midst of that Elsa meta that really like solidified it for me, where he was like, "Hey man, you realize it's actually Loki's only in there to get a second Elsa, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not even a Loki deck anymore. He's just there to get second Elsa." And I think that's the real enduring thing about Loki that's going to be missed, which is he's not actually been the driving force in his own deck for a while now. He's been a secondary package grafted on to another very strong thing to be doing.
Yeah, it's a very interesting pan out because like I agree with this 100% because I tried like now we fast forward back to like the current meta,
Yeah.
right? So Werewolf got kind of sort of nerfed. So I just made this like Quinjet Coulson Loki deck for fun, and I realized that I actually do miss like the bounce package. Like
Yes.
Loki is it's not like it's a Loki deck with a bounce package. It's like a
Yeah.
bounce deck with a Loki, right?
Yes.
Like at this point
Like
because like
you miss like an 8-power Nico for free. It's
yes.
cool, dude.
Yeah, you miss 8 power Nico, you miss a 416 werewolf, and Loki grabs you
Yes.
stuff to supplement that part of
Yes.
the deck. So it's kind of interesting how the evolution of Loki has been. And yeah, I honestly, Loki itself has like gone through so many changes, and it's still the meta powerhouse that it is for like 2 months ish
Mhm.
already. Like every version of it, right, finds its way back to the top because Loki used to be the hard carry, and now Loki is the supplement to what is good. And yeah, I don't know where this is going, like for future, but I think
I hope it's going
Loki being
away.
yeah.
That's
I
the
want a new
answer.
best deck. We've said this on many 8 Cubes episodes, and myself personally, I like to win, but I want to win with a different best deck right now. Now I'm like so incentivized to just
Yeah.
keep playing Loki because, like you said, it just wins.
I
And
I'm
yeah,
so angry on some level. It's like I played a deck yesterday. And like if you looked at it, I would be like, this looks like the worst, most unplayable playle I've ever seen. And it is just like Loki, Miss Marvel, Devil Dinosaur, Shang-Chi, Rogue. If you ever run into a mirror, you are losing it. You are
well,
absolutely losing it. And I just played it a bunch, and it's like, oh, 63% win rate plus 35 cubes in like 30 games. That's pretty good, huh? And it's just like it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. It didn't matter. It was just good.
yeah. Power of
It's
good
like,
cards plus Loki, don't
yeah.
meet the mirror, recipe for
Yeah, who
success.
cares? Like, who cares? It's like, okay, I'll lose the mirrors. It's fine. The things I'm doing are just strong enough anyway. Whatever. Fine. We're good. It's such a weird dynamic where like I keep looking at the stats and it's like all this other stuff seems better. And then I play that other stuff into Loki and I'm just like, oh, this is terrible. It's so hard. It's so hard to
Yeah.
beat a good Loki player. Like that's just the reality. It is so damn hard to beat a Lambie or a Tanjo
Thank you.
or
Thank you.
even me. I was actually that Loki season was probably my best season in terms of win rate because I
It
understood the
was mine as
mirrors.
well.
Like I understood the
Yeah.
mirrors and so it was like I was very far ahead of the curve on those. And I'm much less ahead of the curve like generally than I was specifically in those mirrors. And like that is like it. And to be clear, like my we learned this the other day. My win rate is like 60%, but my snaps are terrible.
Okay, that's something we can work forward and look forward to in 2024. We all can improve. I also can
I'll
improve
figure
for
out
sure.
how to press the
We can
snap
figure
button.
out how to get this done in 2024. But yeah, speaking of 2024, we
Yes.
have come to our last topic, which is not really even a topic. It's like, okay, so basically we've rounded up like the entire year of Marvel Snap, pretty much like defining points in the game in like one video. I hope you guys like enjoyed this. And this topic is really just because it's like the final literal topic of 8 cubes in 2023. I just want to like open the floor to both of us. Like I want to
Sure.
say firstly that like I'm super happy that I got to do this with KM. Like this got me like started on my YouTube journey for the most part.
Yeah, I'm cool.
Actually like producing more YouTube content, you know. So I really think like 8 Cubes has been great. I know a lot of you guys have been enjoying 8 Cubes as well. It's like more of a it's more like a talk show than an actual like video series. But whatever, right? You guys like it, so whatever. But yeah, this was great. I enjoyed doing all these topics, coming out with topics every week. You guys enjoyed the topics as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this like recap of like the year of Marvel Snap. And yeah, KM, what else do you have to add to this?
I'm also grateful to be on a podcast with the greatest Marvel Snap player in the world, KMBest.
Oh. He got me. He straight up got me. I was like, he got me on the spot right
shit!
there, man.
I'm so happy that works. No, I'm very
That
grateful
worked.
to extend my fading relevance by doing a podcast with the next generation. No, for sure. I'm legitimately I'm extremely grateful for your buy-in to this project. I'm extremely grateful that we got it off the ground, and I know that my audience loves it and your audience loves it, and we're gonna keep doing it. I am going to do my level best to make sure it actually gets on Spotify. Please send me this. Please send me this when you're done editing. And we were gonna be trying to do that a lot more. I know it's been completely awful. Like the fact that I edit mine and he has an editor edit his adds like a different roadblock to it every week, basically. And fundamentally though, it's my fault. And so I wanted to apologize for that. Like fundamentally, it's
All
just
good, man.
I usually miss it, and then it's like, oh, why even bother this week if I'm going to be a day late? I haven't dedicated the amount of discipline to it that it needs to be dedicated, and so I apologize for that. That said, I'm extremely grateful that this project has gotten off the ground. I look forward to many more 8 cube wins in the future with the best Marvel Snap player in the world, Lambie series, and I am extremely happy with where we are going into 2024. Here's to 2028 cubes, baby. 2028 cubes. Let's go.
See you guys in 2024. Bye bye.